right, so we are now on record. So I want to introduce myself again. My name is Shimona Kirkland. I am the founder of Monday Night Chat with SK. I try to let everybody know in the beginning that Monday Night Chat came from a vision of mine to have more conversations about issues that we as a culture, as a society, don't really talk about in an organized way or even in an authentic and organic way. But also an opportunity to build knowledge and learn from each other, and also be a stand for each other. Because sometimes people have things going on that they not always have someone to talk to about it, or understand what it is that they're going through, or even understand the process of something. And at Monday Night Chat, we talk about various topics that people can use in their everyday lives and use as a a resource to help them through any issues or learn any information. So that is Monday Night Chat with SK. Tonight's conversation is about the Black, Indigenous, people of color, and mental health awareness. In my experience, I have been around people who do not necessarily believe in the mental health doctrine, and especially in the Black community and minority community. When it comes to mental health, people are very standoffish. They're very against the doctrine of mental health, and I think mainly because they don't have a real understanding of what mental health means. A lot of people are attached to the stigmatism around mental health, and they attach the title mental health to mental illness or mental disorder or crazy or insane. And so tonight we hope to shed some light on the idea of mental health, and also how it affects the Black, Indigenous, people of color community, and how we can do better at engaging in our mental health and supporting each other during our mental health, and also learning what we need to learn in order to debunk some of the myths and get rid of some of the stigmatism. So now I'm going to introduce to you my guest speakers and co-panelists. Joel Phillip, he is my go-to. He is very thoughtful, very empathetic, and a very wise man. He is very vulnerable and open, and I love that he allows himself the space, and he gives himself permission to feel his feelings and experience his experiences, and also teach others and share his experiences in a way to help them grow. So everybody give it up for Joel. And then I have my bestie, Danixa Carr. Nixie Noodles is what I call her. Danixa is one of the most educated, informed, intelligent young women I've ever met in my life. She has a wealth of information. She's well read, and she also is a very vulnerable, open person who seeks to serve in a way where she's helping others to grow and see the world from various perspectives in order for them to see themselves as a whole person, and also helping to guide people through the process of ridding themselves of stigmatisms and myths that may be harming them in their ability to grow. So give it up for Danixa. And panelists, you can share things about yourself that I didn't offer, maybe your occupation or your passions, before we get into the conversation, so our audience can get a feel for who they're talking to tonight.
Wait, Danixa needs to go first.
So we'll go in alphabetical order. That means you, Nixie.
Thank you, Joelle. And aside from that wonderful introduction, Shimona, you're about to make me cry. in a good way. But when I am not those things, I'm currently getting or studying my master's in school counseling at NYU. And Shimona is a big reason that I'm here. Just our conversations about mental health really just highlighted the importance of taking care of your mind, because some people think it's just body and your physical needs, but it's also your mind too. And if your mind's not right, then everything else isn't. So when I'm not doing that, I'm running and definitely just trying to be a pillar in my community and support and help out where I can be of use.
Awesome. Thank you, Danixa. Joelle, tell our audience who you are. Share some
I am not
insight.
I am not going to school at NYU like Danixa is. However, I am a freelance writer and I am always looking for new ways to educate myself. But one thing, as we're going to get into later on today, I'm realizing that emotions and talking about your state of mind definitely go hand in hand. So sooner or later, what I'm looking forward to is actually teaching a course on processing emotions. So at some point down the
Awesome.
line, if anybody's listening and we get to that point, I'd love to help you guys out when the time comes.
Thank you, Joelle. So, let's get into it. So first, I told you guys my reasoning or my motivation for having this conversation. So Danixa, can you define for me, what does it mean when I say mental health awareness for the Black, Indigenous people of color, and why is it important for those two things to coexist in a conversation?
Sure. Typically in the mental health field, mental health is, I don't want to say new, but it comes into the public consciousness every so often. But unfortunately, when it comes to folks of color, and that's Black, Indigenous, and other peoples, that were typically left out of those conversations. And also on the flip side, when it concerns mental health, as you alluded to earlier, Shimona, a lot of people are either in denial, or I kind of see it as a refusal to be vulnerable and to name emotions, which I think are some of the basic pillars of mental health. And talking about the BIPOC community and also talking about mental health is critical, because health is wealth. If we're all not well, and we see the signs of our society and us not being well, those have more detrimental consequences for us than those who are of the majority population.
Thank you, Danixa. Joelle, so same goes for you. Like, what is your perspective around mental health and the Black, Indigenous people of color community? And why do you think it's important to have those two in the chat? Like, why do you think we are having this conversation?
As a history buff, one of the things you learn about through every era is psychological warfare was usually the best tactic to keep peace and order the way the elite wanted it. And we are living in a time where, for once, the masses actually have education of some sort. Most of us are not uneducated. But because of that legacy of so many harmful things being done to societies through this controlled effort, a lot of people lack the ability to sit back and question themselves about how they do things, the way that they communicate, the systems that they work within, and how does it affect them. And for a lot of us, we just don't realize we actually do have issues going on with our mental health. And because we're so unrelated to it, we're furthering this pain that we're causing ourselves and don't even know it. So to me, it's like, it's really, really important to start learning what these things are so we can start going away from these old style social norms and really be aware that like a lot of the things that we may have taken for granted, or a lot of things that we were just quick to label and then push it to a corner, it was an actual real structured thing with an actual issue that caused a real problem. And maybe it's about time we actually do something about it instead of continuing to ignore it at this rate.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that at a very basic elementary level that I say to people is that the brain is the most powerful organ in your body. It is connected to every neuron, every organ, every cell in your body. It controls and tells it what to do. It reacts to, and it sends messages through your body. And people treat it like it's a byproduct of their human experience. Like, oh, we take for granted its power and its access. Like, even when somebody gets into a really bad accident and their brain goes dead, that's it. But you can have machines to help you with your heart. You can have machines to help you with get more blood or fluid in your body. There are things that you can do to help other parts of your body. But when it comes to the brain, once the brain is not functioning, the person has deceased. They're no longer, a person, really, and it's unfortunate because I recently just spoke to someone today who was telling me that their niece had almost drowned, and she is brain dead. And the family, she's still alive, she's on machines, but she's in the vegetation state. All right. And so it just goes to show you the power of the brain and how it changes the human experience when it's not functioning. So my next question to you is, what are some of the myths that you've heard around mental health, and what was the catalyst to help you decide that that was a myth and not the truth? What were some of the things that was in the fabric of your family's values, or a part of your societal norms, that now that you know better, you can debunk that myth? Joelle, we'll start with you.
One thing is how easily we used to say crazy all the time throughout, our neighborhoods and everything like that. And there was never a distinction. Anything that didn't follow the codes of ethics for Black folks was just, no, you crazy. You something wrong with you. You just crazy. But we never made distinctions, or we never tried to see exactly what the issue was for a lot of people. Like, for a lot of us, we had no idea we had bipolar people in our families or within our communities. We had no idea that, like, someone who's suffering from schizophrenia, that's not crazy. They're actually suffering. They're going through something. That disconnect means something, but what is it? And a lot of us who never really educated in that. Or even better, it's like, how many times when we was young, talking about special ed, for the kids in there. And then now when you think about it, special ed is a broad spectrum for autistic, ADHD, ADD. The list goes on, but it's like, there was nothing wrong with those children. They just couldn't survive through the very classic methods of education. That was all for one. And that's it. Like, they needed specialized attention. They needed specialized teachers who actually understood what was going on. But because the information was always limited, or we hadn't gotten there yet, all these stigmas just were enforced in a very highly standardized way. And it had a profound effect on so many of us down the line, especially for, like, someone like myself right now, it's like, I just found out this year I have ADHD. If I was able to connect the dots from so many of my experiences when I was a child up until this point of my life as an adult, that makes so much sense to me now, because I knew something was there. I knew something was off. I knew something wasn't making me like everybody else, but I couldn't understand what it was because everybody else treated it like, no, it's not a big deal, whatever. That's just life. And now I know there's an actual reason. And for a lot of people, that's the hope that they need, that there's an actual reason why they're going through what they're going through. But our lack of awareness never allowed for a lot of us to experience that when we were young and probably when it counted the most. But since we got the information now, the hope is that, you know, you don't pass it on to your kids and then they continue that going. Like the education needs to be given to them now so that they can fully be aware, like what opportunities do you have now that I couldn't get 20 years ago?
Right,
You know,
right. I read an article just recently about ADHD and how, you know, I think it was probably like the mid 90s where it became so like oversaturated with children being diagnosed with ADHD and given Ritalin and all that. And, you know, every time you would see a kid that was overactive, what's the first thing people say? Oh, that kid got ADHD. But the reality is it differs in each child based on nurture and nature. Because the thing was, oh, hyperactive kids, they got ADHD, but some kids actually are more, become more reserved and have issues more so concentrating than trying to sit still. And then I also read in the articles that the symptoms are different for female children and male children. Little girls are more reserved than little boys, so people will always say little boy is bad. But the little girl would have ADHD and it would come up in her ability to do her work assignments or concentrate doing homework, but she wouldn't have that overactive appearance. So it was always an assumption that the boys had the ADHD and the girls would never really be diagnosed like at the same rate boys would be. And it was really interesting to see that distinction, because even when you think of the stigmatism, how many times you said a little girl had ADHD versus a little boy? You would see a little boy running and basically just, you know, for a lack of, not to gender norm anything, but just being a boy, running, flipping, doing what he see other boys do, and mimicking behavior, but automatically, oh, he has ADHD. It was interesting to see that, but something that also was a part of this article, there was a debate whether it was due to bad parenting. That was also something that was kind of like prescribed to parents and educators and everything, that when a kid had ADHD or they had that type of mannerism, it was due to bad parenting. And so it was just really interesting to see like what we're learning now and how we're trying to, revert this and do better, and how we educate ourselves and how we actually manage mental health and diagnosis, especially in children. So Danixa, I'm going to pose the question to you. I just wanted to add that I'm going to pose a question to you as well. What were some myths or, social norms or things that you saw that now that you're educated, you can now, shift a different thinking around that when it comes to mental health? Like Joelle spoke about, people just saying if someone was not following a social norm, they were considered crazy. What was something that you saw? What were some myths that you had to debunk?
I think this goes from more society because, and I say that because at home we were taught to, and I say we, my brother and I, were taught to express our feelings, but in society, I heard, oh, boys don't cry. And I heard a lot of just restrictions on the emotional regulation and also the emotional processing of boys. And now I'm wondering, and especially having worked in a high school, well, it's no wonder that boys or even adolescents have certain types of behavior because they've literally been taught, oh, if you cry, you're labeled this, or if you show emotions as a man, you're weak, or and then we wonder why sometimes when these boys grow up, they become emotionally stunted men because they weren't allowed to process their feelings. They weren't allowed to really be human in a way that all of us go through the motions. And I think when it comes to diagnosing, I've kind of just seen in my experience an over diagnosing of boys of color, particularly Black boys, with certain classifications like ED, emotional disturbance,
Mhm.
ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, and ADHD. And I think from what I'm seeing, the field is moving into a space where people are now understanding the different contextual factors, because sometimes it could be parenting, it could be environment, it could be unfortunate circumstances that cause a child's learning to be delayed and for them to display
Mhm.
symptoms of acting out. And even when I'm in certain classes with students, I see a willingness to just diagnose. And I'm not saying diagnosis doesn't have its place, but I think that
Mhm.
as we're learning more now, you have to take into account a person's just their whole context, just to see what's
Mhm.
going on and what things are needed. Maybe medication is
Mhm.
needed. Maybe it's not medication, it might be behavioral, or the child might need other supports. But I think it's getting to a point where, especially as we people of color understand like the different orientations of these therapists, and just really scrutinizing who's providing help for us, because those type of people are still shaping our conversations. And we just want to make sure that, I think, especially for children in general, we want to have a fair and balanced approach, and we're not just diagnosing, or we're just letting things slip by the wayside. But I think growing up, when it came to emotions, I think it's sad that society is like inching towards recognizing and understanding the emotions of men and boys, particularly of Black men and boys, but it's still a ways off and fully like understanding their complexity and their humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you see it play out in everyday, like it's just like it's so thick in its effect on Black men and Black boys that it's like at this point there's so many levels to uncover in order to get to the core of how it started and how to start changing. Because one other thing like that, the not crying and stuff, men, Black men die at a faster rate, and it's due to not, it's like almost like that, don't cry led into don't worry about things, right? Like for a woman, most women, when they feel a pain or something is not going well with their body, they're at the doctor, right? We're at the GYN, we're at the dentist, we're at the PC. We women spend more time in the doctor than men. Men usually kind of suffer through things until it gets so bad that they're forced to go to get treatment. And I think that's perpetuated through that idea that men don't cry or men shouldn't cry. It's like you have to suck up everything. And in effect, that's a part of mental health, because when you are psychologically in bondage to believe that you can't feel pain, that you can't feel your feelings, it affects you in so many different ways. And it kind of guides your decision making. It kind of is like it it's like a domino effect of how you make decisions. Because okay, if I'm uncomfortable in my relationship because men don't cry, I'm going to suffer through this relationship. Or if I'm uncomfortable at my job, I gotta either quit and do something else or find a way to get myself together, or suffer at that job because men don't cry, right? Men don't ask for help, men don't beg. And it starts from that men don't cry idea, and it has grown into this bigger problem where now we have a epidemic. Men's lives and their where they stand in society has become an epidemic, because now with that little tidbit of comment has created a whole mindset for how men carry out and how they show up in the world. So yeah, that is a great point. I appreciate that. So So one of the things that, really brought me to this conversation as well is the effects, right? Like I just alluded to some of it. What are some effects on society, especially in the BIPOC community that has, been affected because of our disconnect from the mental health awareness? Like, what are some of the consequences that we face?
Well, Jasmine actually just put it in the chat about why men can tend to be violent. And that's kind of one of the things right there. People don't take being emotionally stunted as a mental health issue, but it actually is. But
Mhm.
if your emotions are never allowed to be expressed, you create a behavioral pattern or system, better yet, to lock them away while you
Mhm.
accommodate society for what it wants from you. So on one hand, you're never really being yourself, and on the other hand, you're always ignoring yourself. So
Mhm.
what else could you be but harming yourself bit by bit? That's one way
Mhm.
to look at it, because especially if you can't allow yourself to function as you grow, the requirements of being part of society become greater and greater, yet you can't meet the demand because you never were able to pay the toll first. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It's like getting into a school on a scholarship, but you only had enough intelligence just to get there, not for anything that's actually there. You're not going to be able to pass any of the classes or anything of the sort because you just don't have what it takes. And
Mhm.
that can be seen almost in the same way of dealing with someone who, like for instance, if you've ever seen somebody who has an autistic child, a child that is very much special needs, in general, as a society, we accept that most people are parents and families, but
Mhm.
we don't accommodate them past a certain point. If you get on something like bus, train, or a plane, we don't have anything to accommodate a special needs child who's about to have a fit. We don't have anything to accommodate a parent who needs help with a special needs child. We actually look at them and like, you knew you was getting on this plane. Why did you bring your kid on this plane if you knew
Mhm.
this was going to happen? We'll say
Mhm.
things like that. Or think about how many times that's affected people's jobs. You know what I'm saying? How many people have been suffering in silence while they go to work, while their literal faculties are not correct at that moment. There's
Mhm.
a chemical imbalance. You're being traumatized by something. You you are literally dealing with a malfunction that does not allow you to process information the way that society is requesting you. But you found a way to get through as long as you could until you hit this wall. And now everything that you do depends on you being well behaved and able to run with the rules and regulations. But now your own mind is working against you. Not for reasons that you could control, just something that you can't even deal with. Like I said, like being
Mhm.
bipolar. Some people are fine when they're young, but as they get older, it starts to get worse and worse. Now, all of a sudden, this person's job is in jeopardy because they can't be helped. Or how many times have we been working and then you get like a special needs hire or something like that, but now everybody's like, oh man, who's going to have to train that person, or who's going to have to take
Right.
care of that person? That's going to be a lot. I don't want it to be me. We found ways to reject it way before it even comes in our direction. So the
Mhm.
whole point is everything is steeped in stigmas, and we still don't have enough information to calm our assumptions down and really try to engage with people and find out what's going on. But even worse, the people who are suffering from it, they don't have a lot of education either. So they
Mhm.
don't know how to process the information that they're going through. And then they don't have the skill set to express it to other human beings well enough. You got to teach people how to do that. But most people who can't do it right now only know how to do it through pain because they, somewhere down the line, they were tired of being part of miscommunication and they had to find some way to finally relate to people or get this information out so people could understand where they were coming from. But
Right.
again, it's miscommunication on both sides. This side don't know shit, and this side is living through it, but they don't understand how to express it. So
Right.
it affects us from top to bottom in society because we're all going through something and we still can't even talk about it out loud. We still got to keep it to
Right.
ourselves. We still think that
There's a
vulnerable.
resistance. Yeah, there's a
Exactly.
resistance, I think, overall, right? You know, as someone who suffers from bipolar disorder with acute anxiety, I remember when I first was diagnosed, there was like a relief on my shoulders because now it's like, okay, there's a name for this thing that I've been going through, and now I have a reference to move forward on, right? I can research this. I can find out more data, more information about it. I can look for resources and support. But that's how I operate, right? But the average person, um, when you are surrounded by naysayers, non-believers, miseducated, and people who are more connected with stigmatism, the shame and the loneliness in self-disclosing becomes more feasible than self-disclosing and acceptance. So you put yourself in a space of denial to make people around you comfortable because they are more comfortable with you just being what they assigned you to be, crazy or angry or whatever. But once you say, okay, I'm bipolar, believe it or not, there's a shift. They become afraid or they become embarrassed or shamed, or the judgment comes on. And so I get where some people may feel like I'd rather be misunderstood than understood. I mean, it sounds very like wonky, but it's like people's lack of knowledge or ignorance keeps me safe when it comes to mental health. So Danixa, I'm going to pose a question to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So um, when it comes to mental health and the Black community, the Black people of color community, what are some of the consequences to us not having these conversations or not being aware? What do you see as some of the big issues that happen because we haven't connected?
I see two big, huge interpersonal issues that I think we can see directly in our kids, and that's desensitization and also a lack of empathy. Instead of instead of being the model for our children and our society to model those behaviors, they don't have the appropriate guidance. So for example, and this is a warning as well to anybody who's sensitive to violence, there was an incident, I believe, in Philadelphia in which a group of children, I think no older, if I had to place them, no, between the ages of 5th grade and 7th grade, had attacked and killed an elderly old man. And when you think about that, it sounds crazy on its head because these are kids who they haven't even gone through puberty yet, and they've yet collaborated in taking a life. And I believe as a society, we all bear responsibility for that desensitization and not holding each other accountable, because now, especially what children are seeing, there are no consequences, there's no empathy. So I can, in a sense, instigate an act of malice on someone and that be okay. And I think that we all need to have honest conversations, especially about ourselves and also within our communities, in how we can stop being desensitized and also tune into each other, because we are all products of our environments, and we are all interpersonal relations play a huge part into who we are. If we are a part of positive circles, we more or less have a positive view of ourselves, we have a high self-esteem, and we're likely to do the right things because the people around us are doing so. But if you, I guess, see people who aren't doing the right things or who are engaged in these behaviors, you either become like them, or if they use that against you, your self-esteem, in a sense, also is negative. So we really have to, in a sense, work together to not only hold each other accountable, but also to demand more mental health resources and really, and again, have conversations like ours. And I know you'll get into this, Shimona, as far as like next steps, but just really, I think right now, I think the two biggest problems, if we don't correct it, we are going to see more heinous acts and just more acts of not only people dehumanizing each other, but it's especially worse when it's us dehumanizing each other and it's us disrespecting each other, because as Joel alluded to in the beginning, we've been disrespected by this country as people of color since its inception. And now, because that is the fabric of this country, we are continuing that disrespect to ourselves. And that's going to, if we don't stop it now, we're going to pretty soon be at a point of no return in which we have no sense of community and we're just all disengaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. And, one of the things that came up for me when you were talking was people don't realize that people pleasing is a symptom of mental health as well, right? Or a mental illness. If you read the symptoms around multiple personality disorder, one of the key things is like this people pleasing is almost like debilitating, needing outside gratification, needing outside approval in order to just exist. And the mere thought of someone not liking you kind of sends you in a frenzy. So you tend to participate and submit to behaviors or activities that can harm you and things that may be against your own value system. But that feeling of rejection or abandonment is so intense that you go against your own integrity to stay in that comfortable space of likeness. And a lot of people now, some things are on an extreme level of like murder and crime where that happens, but it's even more, it happens so much every day at different points of your life. When you're going into the grocery store, when you're in the subway or at your job, it happens so quick, this many times a day that you didn't even realize that you're assigning to it. And people don't realize it. And I remember I had it comes up for me more so in romantic relationships, is where I started to identify that behavior and like, oh, wait a minute, something's up here. Why am I submitting to things that in my value system I don't agree with? But that feeling of rejection or abandonment is so intense that I go against my own gut and participate in something that doesn't feel right for me. Why? Because that people pleasing. It's like, oh, people can't not like me. I need to be liked, right? And like I said, it happens so quick, you don't even realize it's happening to you until you have that moment of awareness and realize, okay, and those are things that you can revert. And that brings me to my next question. Mental illness is like a broad stream. Like, if you have read psychology or if you understand psychology, you know that every human being is on the spectrum of one behavior or another. Like no one is extremely neutralized in any emotion, right? No one is always happy and no one is always sad. But we all fall in a different spectrum of different things. Additionally, we all have access and have been through some form of trauma or discomfort in our lives, some more extreme than others, whether it's abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, physical accidents or whatever, or just home environments of poverty, which is another thing. People don't realize poverty is a symptom or is a consequence to, it comes in multiple variations. It can be a symptom, it could be a cause, it could be a trigger. Poverty is a really big issue in mental health that people are not taking a bull's eye view of. Like you hear conversations about it and articles about poverty and how it affects the mental health, but nobody's really taking heed and saying, okay, we need to do something about this because it is affecting society's well-being and health. So my question is, what are some things on a very low level when, if someone's not dealing with a major mental illness, of course we want them to see a professional, but on a regular, I don't like the word regular, on a very low level of next steps? What are some things that helped you to kind of cope and kind of manage your mental health in life? So the example I gave around like building awareness, and kind of like tuning in and taking every situation one thing at a time and kind of like dissecting it to see, okay, what was my role here, what was affecting me, why did I make this decision? So what are some of the things that you guys do to help you kind of like manage your mental health? And what are some things that you can share with the audience or others that they can probably practice?
Well, to go with your example before about people pleasing, that's perfect for me because that is my curse to bear.
Can you speak up a little bit?
I said, going back to your point earlier about people pleasing, that I can work with that right there because that's my cross to bear most of the time. And that's an example of a behavioral pattern that you end up normalizing for yourself and not being aware that you actually cause more anxiety for yourself, choosing that every single time than you do if you would just let it go, which you are deathly afraid of because your mind focuses so much on negativity that it catastrophizes everything to the point where it scares the crap out of you and like it feels harmful to you to like investigate that even further. And I say that because one of the first things and one of the most elementary things that we all need to start doing is you need to start talking out loud. Start talking to yourself out loud, not with anybody else around, not for any other reason other than to be like, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? You need to start saying that out loud because you need to stop having the conversation in your head. You don't know everything. You think because you have your life and you have your experience that you know you better than anybody else, which would probably be one of the worst lies we tell to ourselves. You know how to manage your expectations and you know how to manage your frustration, but you don't know how to manage your life. And until you do, which we all do, you require help in doing that. And we can't get help the way that we want to automatically. So sometimes in order to fully understand what you're dealing with, you have to realize that it's so specific and convoluted that you can't get the answers just by saying, well, it's this. We simplify everything in life because we don't want to deal with the real difficulty of it because it takes time, effort, and energy that most of us don't have on a daily basis or that we even have as a society. So that's why we simplify almost everything and make it seem like if it's not Black or if it's not white, it's not worth paying all that attention to. But that's not true. That's why you do have to start questioning things as an adult, but not from your childlike perspective. You need to start questioning things from your adult-like perspective. That's number two. You need to talk to yourself out loud, but you also need to challenge yourself about your inner child because your inner child, a lot of us adults have not done the work to deal with that side of us. And we're making childish decisions while cosplaying as adults and not realizing it. And those same decisions that we make don't just affect us, they affect those around us, around us, the people that we're taking care of, the people that we love. To fully express your curiosity or frustration with something that you might be doing mentally, you really have to question yourself as to why you've been comfortable managing things the way that you have all of this time. And a lot of us do not want to work that hard to figure that part out. Because then you got to think about the past. You got to dig up old memories that you may not want to dig up. You may have to relive certain traumas that you may not want to go through. But everything is interconnected, whether we want to admit it or not. But between talking to yourself out loud, challenging your inner child, and sometimes literally writing down what you're feeling in the moment as it's happening, so you can see over time whether or not you have a consistent feeling or if it comes in spades or is it different every other time.
Mhm.
you can now have a track record of like, well, what have I been doing all this time? And now you can present it to somebody. So say you're going to go to therapy. Now you can tell this person, look, this is what it's been like for me for 6 months. And this is what I've been experiencing. And then when I try to like question it, like these are the feelings that I come up with while I'm questioning it. Can you help me figure out what this means? But it's all breaking it down to this most elementary spots, as in not necessarily the things that you can control, but the things that you can observe right then and there. We can't fight the whole thing. And I feel like that's where so many of us tap out from the very beginning, because you put the whole weight on your shoulders and you realize it's overwhelming. But just breaking it down to something very, very small and very, very specific, you slowly but surely get the answers that you're looking for, because it's work. That's the whole point. It may feel like it's so much to it takes so much to really try to conceptualize what mental health actually is per person. But regardless of it, in your own experience, you should have enough self-awareness to be like, I don't like this. I don't like how I feel. I don't like how confused I am right now. I don't like where this is going. Or when you're watching other people, I don't like it when 1 minute they're okay and the next minute they're just so angry and all over the place. If you have these thoughts, then stop invalidating them by keeping them to yourself. It's time to put them outside of yourself so you can actually see where this inquiry can go, and there might be actual help on the other side. But that's what is required. You got to still put your first foot forward in order to get things going.
Yep. I think Danixa and I came up with this verbiage: taking inventory of yourself. Um, you know, I do that all the time. I in the moment I'm in the situation, I'm like, okay, this is happening, right? Or because I'm someone who ruminates on things, like if I have an argument with you, you could be in your bed sleep, having a good old snooze, and I'm still like, but why did I say that? But why did they say that? What made them say? And I ruminate and I ruminate, and then I keep asking questions because I want clarity. And it's always helped me get to a space where I can either take accountability or hold someone responsible, and then create boundaries so that particular conversation or conflict doesn't happen again. And if it does, now we're not talking about what I did, what you did. Now we're clear on this was the boundary, you went over the boundary. Now we need to evaluate where this friendship or relationship is going. But until you do inventory and hold, people lack the ability to want to take accountability, which kind of perpetuates conflict further, because now you're trying to be right. You're trying to be right, and it doesn't matter where it's sent from. You could be, what my sister say all the time, you wrong and strong, but you're trying to be right. But when you take inventory, when you start evaluating yourself, because you can't control others, like Joelle said, you can't control other people. When you take time for evaluate what you have available to you to make sure that you feel better, then you can start having dialogue with others to set boundaries on what it is that you require for your space, but you still have to allow them space to do the same for themselves. And that there's no compromise, there's no relationship, right? But in most cases, you are able to, for the people that are for you, your tribe, you're usually able to come to a compromise, or what a lot of people do sometimes, they, what you call it? They don't give up. It's something like, they let themselves down, So yeah, that is a good one. Taking inventory, asking the questions, and getting to the bottom of things. So the next time I'm going to ask you the same question. I'm going to repeat the question. What are some things that you do to help you kind of like manage your mental health and help you to cope with things?
I think one of the biggest things that I've started with myself and that I've really just more lean into is just being kind and compassionate to myself. And just like you alluded to before with taking inventory, I know that sometimes I can be very driven, which is good, but it can almost be driven to a point where I'm almost hard on myself for not achieving something or for something not coming together. And recently, I think a lot of our conversations about mental health and just seeing just the culture evolve with it has just made me more comfortable with just being compassionate with myself and just saying, you know what, it's okay, you made that mistake. Okay, well, what can I do better next time? Or what is this telling me about a particular behavior or viewpoint? And
Mhm.
beyond that, it's multi-layered for me. Joel hinted at one of my favorite ones I've been doing since I was a teenager, which was journaling, just allowing myself a space not only to vent, but to say things that, you know, would sound okay in the heat of the moment, but when expressing it to someone, they may not receive it as that. They might take it the wrong way. So just really
Mhm.
just putting out all my emotion and just being as honest as possible. So when I do review, I can go, oh wow, I felt that way. Okay, well, what's that about? And I can learn more about the situation. And also just tapping into different aspects of my personality. Like I love to run. So sometimes I like being in movement just to process things if I have the time, if I have the space. Like I said, journaling, dancing. Sometimes I try to get in a few
Mhm.
moments of dancing throughout the day just to, insert some joy in my life and just to remind myself I'm not just someone who just is an input and an output, or I'm just this
Mhm.
particular role. Like I'm also a being who likes to have fun and who likes to do that as well. And also something I'm leaning more into, community. I find that I feel much more better when I talk to yourself, when I talk to other trusted friends, when I talk to my mom, because I feel like I can express myself honestly and I don't have to edit or change or
Mhm.
preface anything. And also, those are the people, you all are the people who hold me accountable too. So, accountability is expressing an idea or an issue to a friend and having that person just do that in real time. And I also do teletherapy. I'm not exactly comfortable yet with doing therapy in person, but
Mhm.
teletherapy has really been pivotal and helped me process career transitions, life transitions, and just overall just being an objective observer and being very solutions oriented. And one thing I would just recommend for people is do what resonates with you. If you're not comfortable with journaling, that's okay. Maybe you have a safe friend or safe person, or maybe it's an activity, maybe it's a song, maybe it's a recipe, maybe it's spending
Mhm.
time with your kids. So, and maybe sometimes it's taking a shower, having that nice cold shower on a hot summer day, and you're just simply taking care of yourself. Because I also think of it too as there are people who wish they have more movement capabilities and they can't care for themselves, which is very
Right.
such an intimate act. So, take pride in the simple things like brushing your teeth, getting a new hairdo, just something
Mhm.
that makes you not only feel good, but also don't break the bank. Not telling you to get like a nice,
Right. Right.
wig or
Be
like
kind to your
$500
pockets
nails.
and your wallets too.
Right. Make sure you're fed, make sure your needs are taken care of. But if you want to just splurge on that little activity, go ahead, because, when you get older, you're going to think back on your life and you want to make sure that you're pouring into as much as yourself, and also just be kind to yourself. Just
Mhm.
and if that's hard for you, just seek help, seek mental health resources, and seek someone who can help you process those things.
Absolutely.
I like
Absolutely. Thank you, Danixa. So
pick up
we're
actually.
wanting to go ahead.
Wait, I just wanted to pick up real quick after what the next said, because that be kind to yourself part, that stuff is that part is extremely, extremely hard. You've had a lifetime of like destroying yourself on the inside. Like someone like myself, people are always so used to seeing me be a kind and patient person with them. They have no idea how disgusting I am to myself. They don't understand how untrusting
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
impatient I truly am of myself. I demand perfection out of myself at all times when I know good and well there is no such thing as perfection. I
Mhm.
ruminate over things well beyond their expiration date. I speak as if I could time travel and change the things that went wrong for me, how many decades ago, as if I was supposed to be responsible for the things that happened to me as a child, or the things that happened to me when I was too incapacitated to take care of myself in some kind of way. These things are just the long-term effects of these mental health issues that we've had for a very, very long time, and then how they evolve into other issues. Sometimes people think when you're talking about mental health, you're just talking about one aspect, and they forget that you're probably living with 7. Like, our issues are a lot more compounded than we think. And that is why the part about being kind to yourself really, really comes into effect, because first and foremost, you just got to understand, you don't understand. And it's not your fault that you don't understand. It wasn't taught to you. It wasn't explained to you. And the society doesn't put a big emphasis on it either. It actually works and benefits society more that you stay dumb and in pain, rather than be educated and taking care of yourself. Because if you were to do that, there are a lot of things in society you would not accept anymore. So it's one thing that we are literally doing this harm to ourselves on a daily basis, and we still think that it's okay because society said, well, this is how we do things, and that's just the way it is. If you really want to help yourself, probably the number one thing to do at all times is remove those words from your vocabulary. That's just the way it is, because that's a lot. If you really truly want to begin your mental health journey in life to see exactly where you are and what parts of you truly do need help, the first thing you really got to do is stop saying that's just the way it is. Because there's an actual reason, or reasons, multiple. And until we try to do the work and figure out what that is, that's a lie that supports all the harm that we continue to do to ourselves. And that's why we gotta, it's not easy as a group to do it. So that's why you do have to find your personal responsibility in the
because everybody's going at a different pace, going in different directions. And, one of the other things, one of the other points I, want to bring up to people, to understand the distinctions, right? Mental health is not mental illness. A lot of people, when they hear mental health, they automatically go into this idea of a mental illness. Mental health is a part of your overall health screening. You want to make sure that this is okay, because it operates to it operates to foster every aspect of your life. If you're not emotionally stable, a lot of things can happen. So when you focus on your mental health, it's like really taking inventory of where you are and acting accordingly to resolve that feeling or feel that feeling, whatever you need to do. And so I always try to tell people that, you have to make that distinction between mental health and mental illness. Mental illness is a element of mental health. It is a illness or illnesses that occur when someone's mental health is not meeting the standard and is affecting their everyday life. And so therefore they go and get a diagnosis to help to neutralize whatever the issue is, because there's no cure for it. And however you neutralize it, it could be through medication, it could be through therapy, it could be through other self-care opportunities, whatever way you choose and your support system chooses to manage your mental health when you are diagnosed with a mental illness is your journey to take. And so my goal in life is to continue to have these sorts of conversations so people really understand the distinctions and also understand their role in their mental health. And, some of us are well functioning and feel like, okay, I'm able to connect the dots in life, so I'm okay. I don't need to manage this. But any thing in this world, it ages, it has wear and tear, and that is the mind as well. if you're constantly going through trauma and struggle, eventually there's going to be some wear and tear on the mind that is going to affect you. But if you're constantly doing repair and managing and maintenance on your mind, in your mental health, you can be a step closer to making sure that you don't end up with a mental illness, or if you have one, it's manageable and it's not affecting your life. So just one last question before we wrap up. How are you going to share, what are some things you're going to do after this conversation to make people more aware of mental health? And that's for the audience members as well. So you could either unmute yourselves or you can put in a chat box. What are some things, or what is one thing you're committing to do to bring more awareness about mental health in the BIPOC community? Am I saying it right, Danixa?
Yeah, although sometimes when I hear it in school, I'm like, what?
I just say the whole thing, Black, Indigenous, people of color. I always just say the whole thing. But what are some things that we are committing to do to bring more awareness? And it doesn't have to be a grand idea. It doesn't have to be nothing major, but something you can contribute to the awareness of mental health in our community.
I don't want to put you out there too much, Shimona, but one of the things that I am committing to do is that, well, I'll mention is that Shimona is in the process of putting together a awesome community event that's restoring and healing, and part of that is panel conversations. And I would like to do my part by speaking at that said event about mental health. And even in my conversations with just friends and family and just listening to them, I think listening, it's such an underrated component. In my studies so far, I've heard listening from the moment I opened up my first course to, a year later. And it's the same because the transformative power of just having someone bear witness to an experience, and then in that talk about certain mental health concepts. I know self-care is right now is really big in popular culture, and maybe trading self-care tips. So if I'm in a conversation with someone, I'll just trade my self-care tips and we just learn from each other, because what works for me, like I said, may not work for you, but at least we're talking about and continuing conversations about how are we caring each other and also caring for each other, and how can we then expand that and extend care to our communities.
Awesome. Anyone else? What is something you're committing to do to bring more awareness to mental health?
Well, I know for me, I'm demonstrating it out loud as often as I can. What I mean by that is I just had the conversation with people. I'm recording myself. I'm making TikToks. I'm writing whatever I want to write, and I'm just trying to put the information out there. It's always been strange to me and difficult because I didn't have any bit of guidance of like, how does a man express these issues, and how do you say this out loud and anything? I just fumbled and fumbled and fumbled some more until I realized nobody really needs to give me permission to do this. I can just do it because I want to. I already have the permission because I gave it to myself. And I feel like that's something that I try to keep in mind at all times. Like the strongest thing that I could do for my own mental health is just recognize how important it is to me. And as long as I want to continue nurturing it, I feel like there'll be more and more that I can learn to take better care of myself. But not just that, I need other people to see it for themselves too, because regardless of whether or not I want to admit it, my life is influenced by other people. And if we have an understanding about something that actually affects all of us, even if I make progression, I'm still going to be hindered because other people aren't allowing themselves to take good care of themselves in some kind of way. So it's just like, it's just spreading the word, showing it out loud so that people can see it for themselves and realize it's not this scary thing that you need to do in the dark. It's not this weird thing that you have to, you know, like only do in secret societies or something like that. Like, no, a sensible person who's worried about their mental health is not a strange person at all. That is actually the most genuine person you're gonna find. So trusting in that that's my goal for right now. And everybody else can figure out the baby steps for them, but that's what counts, the baby steps. Every
Mhm.
little thing that you do will help you down the road. And yes, Shimona, when you do create this event, you know I'm down for it. So
Of course, and I will be knocking on y'all's doors. So we have some things in the chat. He was said being patient and considerate to people that have mental issues is one way. Listen to them and offer your assistance if they need it. Yep. Anybody else want to share before we wrap? You know, some ways that they're going to bring more awareness to mental health in the community. You can unmute yourself or you can write in the chat box. Ron's smile is making me feel very happy. It's helping my mental health tonight. And him just being on tonight, joining us.
Look at him being happy.
You
There
rock,
you go.
yo. I definitely want to add. I definitely want to add something to that. Actually, as Joe mentioned, I think having that conversation of mental health, I actually had that happen this weekend. Just sharing what you're doing, right? Like being in this space, having that conversation for yourself, right? For us here, having these sentences, take that to where you're going next. And it's funny. Someone shared with me, you know, hey, I hear you doing another ride. That's amazing. How do you train? How do you get yourself out of that? That in itself is a way of like sharing how you get out of mental funk, or how do you keep your vibrations high. So basically sharing what you're doing alone is enough, but also having that conversation with some stranger, which is another thing. Someone was walking down the street 2 days ago, Indian man, works at a Central Park plaza, and he just looked at me. He's like, you're riding high, man. What do you do? And that alone allows people to have a conversation itself. So yeah, being able to share what you're doing, like how you treat yourself to others of any race, creed, gender, allows them to understand that to raise your vibration, you have to get out of it. And you have to find what you like, what you enjoy, what are your interests, and raising that vibration. And you'll attract people. I mean, you'll naturally attract people, just like my smile.
Yeah, that is an amazing point, because you know we talk so much about the downside of mental health and making yourself feel better, but also keeping yourself motivated. You know, some people are very determined, very goal oriented, and that is a form of mental health because it's something that you have to do mentally to prepare yourself, to keep yourself in a space where you can keep striving, keep moving, thriving with whatever the task is. And people's passion sometimes is a vehicle for how they become motivated, but they do things. They're like, okay, I made a decision to do this. This is the training I'm going to do to accomplish that goal, which takes mental strength. So thank you so much for sharing that, Ron. We appreciate it. And I want to thank you for joining. You're a new member of the chat. This is your first day on the block, so we welcome you. But we hope you come back and join us at another chat. So it's 9:20 now. We did start a little late, but if anybody has any things they want to share, now is the time before we wrap. But I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's, the reason why I want to do this community event in September is because we always have like a small group of people, which is fine. I love the intimate group. Every week, we have new people. We are on episode 14 of Monday Night Chat. Thank you. We're on episode 14. And so we've been doing this. I say we because it's a community. We've been doing this for a few months now. And so every time we have a new person, that's a new ear, that's a new person we affect and impact. So it's really important. But every week we have different topics, different panelists bringing their perspective. If you are someone who wants to talk about a particular chapter. Yes, Nelly. I think she jumped off early, but we want to thank Danixa's mom, Nelly, for joining us. She's also a new member to the community. And I see a Jasmine as well, who's also a new member of the community. I want to thank her for joining. But yes, in September, my goal is to do a community event called the Community Chat with SK. And I'm going to have about 4 panel discussions about various topics. Last week, you guys missed it. We had a conversation about voters' rights, and Kathleen, it wasn't last week, it was before 4th of July. Kathleen gave us a bunch of gems on what to do to protect our votes. And to, how to navigate through the Board of Elections and use the resources available to do absentee ballots and educating people on who's eligible to vote, because everybody, believe it or not, is eligible, but they have put myths and misinformation out in the community to hijack our votes. And so now it's time to unveil the truth so people can know that they have a right to vote. And that includes individuals who are incarcerated. That includes people who are on probation. That includes folks who are on parole. All are eligible to vote. People incarcerated can do an absentee ballot in the district where they were residing before they were incarcerated. So we will definitely do another segment on voters' rights because this is an election year. We just voted for our governor in New York for the primaries. So the general election will be happening, I believe, in November. So there's more work to do around that. So basically, that's what Monday Night Chat's about: educating, informed, and keeping people aware. And that community event will have all of the elements of Monday Night Chat in it, with a cool addition of Holding Down Productions, where we're going to have live performances. So it's going to be a mesh of the masses together. So Joelle, you may be on a panel and doing a poem, who knows? So just get yourself ready and prepare for that. But again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Again, this particular podcast, Monday night podcasts are recorded and they are uploaded to my YouTube channel. You can just find it by going to YouTube and clicking Shimona Kirkland, and you will find a playlist that says Monday Night Chat with SK to see previous episodes if you want to look at those and see some of the other conversations we've had. But that is a wrap. I want to thank again everybody for coming and sharing your insight, and we will see you next Monday. I'm about to start doing some TikToks, so go on my Instagram page at ShimonaK1 and see all my funny little TikToks that I'm going to be doing. But even more so, please share the wealth and let people know about this chat on Monday nights at 8, so they can come and share their insight and learn something from the group that comes here. Good night, all. Thanks to Danixa and Joelle for joining me tonight. You guys are dope.